Please welcome Jessica Matthews, Tony Chan, Caren, Ulrich, Stacy, and Stephanie Mehta.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be moderating this panel about entrepreneurship. I think that becoming an entrepreneur is one of the bravest and most ambitious things that a woman can do, partly because, with the exception of Tory Burch and a few others, there haven't been great role models for women who want to launch large-scale growth businesses until now. Tory is joined by some terrific women, including two women that we have on stage, Jessica Matthews, who is the founder and CEO of Uncharted Power, and to my left, Caren Stacy, who is the founder and CEO of Diversity Lab. And we also have Tony Chan on stage, who is the CEO and managing partner of the Cue Ball Group. And he's here to help us talk a little bit about financing of entrepreneurial businesses, along with some other issues. To get started, I wanted to ask each of the panelists to very briefly, since our time is so short, to tell us what your company does and why you started it. Let's start with you, Jessica.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to just, be in a room of women and awesome men who realize that, behind every strong woman, there's more strong women. So wonderful. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Jessica O. Matthews, and I'm the founder and CEO of Uncharted Power. What is Uncharted Power? We're an energy technology company. Specifically, it's the kind of company that's trying to figure out how we can actually have a sustainable energy system by looking at how we harness the energy from motion and actually use that in a meaningful way to create a system that is on-demand, democratized, and decentralized. It started for me when I was 19 years old, when I invented our first flagship product, the socket ball, which is an energy-generating soccer ball that actually harnesses the kinetic energy from play, stores that power inside of the ball, and then it can be used as an off-grid power device for small electronics. And now we've scaled that technology up to be an actual platform for energy generation, transmission, and storage. And I'm spending a lot of time figuring out how I can turn all of the roads and sidewalks in Africa into decentralized power plants. Yeah. So, that's it. Oh, and I should add that I studied psychology and economics in college. However, I have a PhD in Google, so.
And Jessica, very quickly, why start a company, and particularly why a for-profit company in a space where typically NGOs and nonprofits have really played a big role?
So why start a company? Because in my mind, entrepreneurship equals problem solving. And I had a big problem. I'm a dual citizen of Nigeria and the US. The majority of my family lives in Nigeria. Oh, wait, Niger, not the last. Yes, okay, anyway. So, they rose up with me. Switching back. So, majority of my family lives in Nigeria, where the energy issue is not even a socioeconomic issue, it's an infrastructural issue. And I got into the space because I want my father, I want my cousins, I want my family to have power. I want them to see the world as a place that they can affect change and create the lives that they want versus just kind of pretending like the problems don't exist and seeing how that can affect everything that you do. And so, why make it a for-profit? Because I believe that the economy is designed to really give you real feedback, whether you like it or not. And sometimes when it's a nonprofit, people take the narrative and they don't actually look at the substance of what you're doing. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to make sure that what I was building, people really wanted, and I could tell because they're voting with their dollars. They're telling me what's going on with their dollars. And I think designing that, though, doesn't necessarily mean that we're not doing good, especially when you have female entrepreneurs. Like, inherently, I'm building this technology platform for good, and I'm scaling it for good. And as a result, when I do generate revenue, that can also be used simply for more good. So I think the dichotomy between entrepreneur and social entrepreneur is something that needs to be looked at. Often women are called social entrepreneurs, and it's weird. I have mixed feelings about it because No, I'm an entrepreneur. Yes, I'm focused on energy. Others are focused on, I don't know, valet parking your dog, but that doesn't mean that I'm not an entrepreneur. I just feel like this is the problem I really need to solve.
Caren, I'm going to ask you a little bit about why you started Diversity Lab and what it does.
So I have a valet system for dogs. I will tell you, though, that I have a new girl crush, and it's you. So 1.6 million women left the workforce in the last 10 years, and I'm going to bring every single one of them back. So Diversity Lab leverages data to prove to big, prestigious companies that these women should be welcomed back into the fold, they should be advanced into leadership positions, and they should be paid equitably. And as part of that, we're looking at human stereotypes, right? Because as you and I talked about, I expected as we were bringing women back into the fold that women would be accepting of that, right? Because maybe they took a hiatus. But it turned out that I was wrong in terms of stereotypes, that a lot of women looked at some of these women who have taken a hiatus. By the way, when some people talk about returners, they say women have taken a break. Raising children is not taking a break.
Yeah.
So some of these women who didn't take a hiatus would look at these women who were coming back and say, I didn't need to take a break, I don't know why you did. And that's, gut-wrenching to hear if you're a woman who's stepping back into the workforce. And interestingly, men were our biggest supporters, right? Because they, a lot of times, have a wife that took a back seat to her job in order to let him continue working or to raise children. And so they have wives and sisters and daughters who took a hiatus and want to come back, and they're seeing this thick brick wall that they're hitting as they try to come back. So we started it with 4 law firms. We didn't have any funding, but we prototyped it and said to those law firms, you could be first. And they said yes. They all agreed to take 1 returning woman, talking about a risk-averse group. We'll take 1 woman, Caren. They all took 1. Then they took 2, then they took 3, and we're only 4 years in, and 70 women have come back into the fold, and 86% of them have gotten high-paying jobs as a result of that returnship and of changing the stereotype about these women who they thought were overqualified or not committed or all of the other things that go through people's heads when they welcome someone back.
And very quickly, because I want to get to Tony in our short time, why do this? Why start a company? Why take the risk of doing this on your own as opposed to working through a big law firm or through another big organization?
So I was the head of talent for 27 years for some of the biggest law firms in the world. And every day I would get a resume from a woman who had taken a hiatus. And every time I went to a practice group leader or someone who was in charge of hiring and said, look at this great gal, right? She's got all this years of experience, she was Harvard, whatever. They would say, gosh, Caren, that's too big of a risk. And so in hiring 3,700 lawyers over 27 years, I never once convinced any of these law firms to hire a woman. And I thought, if I'm just working within 1 law firm, I'm pushing that boulder up the hill in 1 law firm. But if I can go out and convince 4 to try it, then 8 will do it, then 16 will do it. And now there's almost 37 law firms who are hiring these women, and now there are 7 big legal departments like Salesforce and Microsoft and Accenture and BMO. And so it had a ripple effect by going outside and trying to create a little bit of healthy competition among these competitors for great talent.
Tony, I think of Q-Ball as a very different kind of investment firm. You're a venture investor, but you have a much more long-term perspective on things. Talk a little bit about your investment thesis and why that may, in fact, be a more friendly thesis, a long-term thesis, might be more friendly to female founders.
So I'm Tony Chan. Hi, I'm the token male.
With impeccable taste.
I see 12 other men just all in the front. You can integrate back there. They're not going to bite. Truly. What are you doing all hanging out with each other? Jeez. That's one of the problems we've got to solve. I probably have the unique distinction of having the only venture group that's aspiring to be a Berkshire Hathaway of venture, but that started as a nail salon. And clearly you do that because, prior to that I had about 10 years of technology. My partner and I were privileged enough to build up Thomson Reuters and do another technology startup. And with all that, you should apply that to a nail salon. But I think that was the insight for me. I think one of the things that's frustrating right now is people look at us, and we've invested between nail salons, things like clean beauty, things like a recent investment Athena Club to revolutionize tampons and personal care. They say, why are you doing women-led businesses? Well, I've never thought of it like that. We've never thought about doing women-led businesses. We've never thought about being inclusionary. We just thought about doing good businesses. And I think it's time to break down the notion and stereotype that innovation has a gender, that innovation has an industry. There's as much innovation as Tory doing a Riva flat as someone doing a Google algorithm. I mean, there's much innovation doing a nail salon that can revolutionize clean beauty, that could be a moment of self-care, as there is about any kind of AI. So we got to break those down, and that's what we've tried to do, investing across a pretty diverse set of ventures with, to your point, a view that we get into businesses not to sell them, but to hold them hopefully forever.
And by the way, to make money. This is not a charity on your part.
Well, Jessica, you made the great point. I mean, I think it takes mostly men, the 50 Shades of Beige that are out there in Silicon Valley, who kind of like go out there and they have this notion that if you're doing something purposeful, it cannot coexist with doing something profitable. And I think Milton Friedman's very definition of for-profit and what a business means has to fundamentally change. Having purpose is the only long-term differentiator. They can coexist. They must coexist. We need to be purpose-led first.
Well, as long as we're taking hits at Silicon Valley, Jessica, you're based in New York, and specifically you're based in Harlem. What kind of reaction do you get when you tell people
I'm trying to avoid the 50 Shades of Beige? Look, I mean, listen, it was, the decision was made about 2-3 years ago. We had raised our Series A, mind you, after already building a profitable multi-million-dollar business, because you have to literally go 3 times as far, to get half as much, I guess, when you don't necessarily match the stereotype. And I started to think, we raised a successful round, and I tried to think about how often people are told that to get where you're going, you need to forget where you came from. And in my mind, that would be the exact opposite of what I needed to do. And even my investors, some of them, part of that beige conglomerate, were like, oh, hell no, you need to remember where you started. Because it is your background, it is your experience, it is your perspective as a woman of color, as someone who's part of the African diaspora, that has led to this innovation. And that's what's going to keep taking you where you need to be. And so I wanted to make sure that my team, that we were in an environment that reminded us of who we were serving. And what I love about Harlem is that, it's very much a microcosm of the world. From, talking to your rabbi on 96th Street, to your barber on 125th Street, to your teacher on 145th Street, just the walk from the subway to the office reminds you of how many different people live in this world and what problems they're going through. Previously, when we were downtown, we would see basically 2 different versions of the same type of person all the time. And if you're not very aware of that, you start to believe that that's the entire world, and I think it can be a huge disadvantage. So we did it because I think that where you are can have a huge influence on how you design, and from the product all the way to the business model.
Caren, you bypassed investors altogether. You bootstrapped your business. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and would you do it differently if you knew today what you knew when you started your business?
I love to say, yeah, I bypassed him, I bootstrapped it, but the reality was I was fearful of the VC community. I didn't understand the terminology, I didn't understand the lingo, I had heard all these horror stories about what it was like, and I just was fearful. And
Me too.
So I thought it was easier to try to figure out how to do it on my own, which sounds really silly now, right? And it was challenging, right? Because forever worried about cash flow, forever worried about building the foundation, because everything you're doing, you're trying to make a profit, and you're trying to figure out the balance of making a profit and running a business. And when do you hire your first HR person? Or when do you actually get a lawyer on staff, right? So all of those things were hard simply because I didn't take the money and build the company in that way. I built it as a prototype, And then I went to corporations or law firms that I was going to sell it to and said, you could be first. It's like an info commercial now that I think about it. Buy now, 5 minutes, countdown. But the good news is that we made it work. And we are well over $1 million and only in our 4th year. We're profitable. We now have 10 people, which is a pretty big deal. And up on the screen was our first class of women that we helped return. And as part of this, now they're all giving back, and they're paying it forward. And so we've had this huge ripple effect that's well past me and well past the 10 people who work with me. We've got an army of women returners who are going out and doing good. And I don't know if you guys know this, but there's statistics that show that women put a huge portion of their salaries back into their communities.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so just as a result of bringing these 70 women back, and these women are making on average $250,000 around each, they're putting a lot of that money back into our communities for the things that you're doing, for the things you're doing. And so this feels like a really good time to be doing good and making money.
Yes.
And you didn't give up any equity in your company.
Not a dime.
That's powerful too. Tony, there have been many articles written about how little venture capital flows into women-founded or women-led businesses. You're obviously doing your part to pour more money into those kinds of businesses. But what's the solution? What are the things that your industry needs to do in order to loosen up the purse?
Well, the first thing I'd say, because there's so many great entrepreneurs here, we've got to remember the greatest entrepreneurs are, I came from an immigrant family that moved to Newfoundland, but the real greatest set of entrepreneurs are mothers out there.
Yes.
And, women are entrepreneurs every day. The definition of an entrepreneur is someone that relentlessly pursues opportunity or purpose without regard to resource. We should not equate getting venture capital with success. Today, we equate getting PR and funding with success. Significance is about pursuing that purpose and building a real business. So I think when you look at companies like Lynda that sold for $1.5 billion, Spanx, look at your business. They didn't start with venture capital. That's the first thing. Absolutely, we got to change it on both sides. On the side for women entrepreneurs, there's a lot of talk and books I've been reading about how can you, demonstrate more confidence, how can you be more X and Y. The only thing I fear there is that sometimes that teaching and training almost positions that women should be more like, quote unquote, men. And sometimes that's right in the instance where we know that men overstate qualifications and women understate in CVs. That's true. That's another way of saying that men lie more. But the real thing I fear for is that when you look at the next generation of leadership, we need more leadership of character, compassion, and truth, and less about a lot of confidence, leadership of confidence. And we already know from cognitive scientists that your worst answer is often your first one. And all this training, like, go speak faster, go knock it out. We just don't need more dumbass male-like thinking around that, right? I mean, we need to get people that embrace what is naturally in you. Embrace that maternal instinct, embrace that nurturing, embrace that character, embrace that truth. And, funding will come, and that's the best time to get it when you don't need it.
Yeah. In our very little time remaining, I know there are a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs out there, existing entrepreneurs out there, people who don't yet know that they're about to become entrepreneurs. 30 seconds from each of you, advice for people in the room that are pursuing their entrepreneurial dreams. We'll start with you, Jessica.
I think for me, the best I can say is, a lot of things people think women should go into and men should go into. And I'm definitely in a space that people don't usually assume a woman will be in. I'm in tech, I'm in science, I'm in high-tech infrastructure. I have cute, bedazzled hard hats, and I'm proud of them. And what I will say is that remember that science, the actual definition of science, is the study of life. And if you're living, you're halfway there. Don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't be doing this, or no one has ever seen someone in that space. To me, that's even more exciting. It means you're that much more likely to bring a new perspective to that space and to that industry and literally be disruptive just because you're not the status quo. And that, to me, is not an obstacle. It's a competitive advantage.
I think the two greatest factors to any entrepreneurial journey for success are A, self-awareness, and second is self-belief. Embrace those things, and lastly, don't put up with the mansplaining, right? When I'll tell one quick 10-second story. When I started Mini Lux and finally got some outside investors, I'm explaining why it's a moment of self-care, self-expression. This is how you actually do the manicure. And then the guy goes, which one is the mani, which one's the pedi again? And then I go explain. I say, oh, well, let me tell you what you should do. So don't put up with that mansplaining stuff, right? Be confident, be self-aware, and have lots of self-belief in your dreams.
Caren?
So whether it's in an entrepreneurial setting, whether it's in your current job, it doesn't matter. If you go ask for a raise, or you go ask for a promotion, or you go ask for funding, you're gonna hear the word no. And here's what I would suggest. When you hear it, think no means not now. Not never, just not now. I'll come back for you. And ask again, and again, and again until you get yes.
Such great advice, such words of wisdom. I'm going to remember 50 Shades of Beige. That's a good one.
I'm definitely quoting you on that.
Thank you to Jessica, Tony, and Caren.
And
All
you,
right.
Stephanie.
Thank
Yes,
you
very much.
Thank you. Wonderful.